I'll restart the introduction. So firstly, I'd like to reintroduce Babalwa Goba, Managing Partner at Majali CA. She brings over a decade of SMP experience, and she's a seasoned governance and risk advisor with extensive experience serving on multiple boards and audit committees. She currently also chairs both the risk management and the remuneration, social and ethics committees of various organizations. Next up, Karen Maitland. Karen is a financial accounting, assurance and ethics specialist with a side passion for legislation. As she states, in her own business, Maitland and Associates, she serves as a technical freelance consultant and a trainer to those working within the accounting and legal profession. Additionally, she serves as a technical advisor on various cycle committees, including the vice chair of the National Small and Medium Practices Group and the chair of the Midlands District Association and the Legal Practices and Accountants Committee. So welcome, ladies.
Thanks, Liesl, for having us. It's always exciting to be here. And, life happens, and it's all about how you absorb and how you roll with it. So at least everybody knows that we are genuinely live and that things happen to everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being so gracious and being adaptable as well as we switch to the new platform. So let's get started since we are running a little bit behind, and I'm hoping I can save us a bit of time. So firstly, I'd like to pose an open question to both you ladies, but also please to our attendees who are still with us. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. The question is, what quality do you equate with ethical leadership or good firm culture? And please, I welcome you to pop any thoughts into the meeting chat. And then Babalwa, I'll ask you first, please, to give us your thoughts on what those qualities are.
Thank you very much, Liesl, and good afternoon to you and everybody who's on the call. So for me, when I think about ethical leadership, I think transparency is one quality that really comes to mind. Being transparent with your team about the decisions that you're taking and the principles that guide those decisions that you're taking, and also making sure that you're consistent in future, applying the same principles in the decisions that you take in future, because that empowers your team to also take the same principles and use them in applying their minds and making the right decision when no one is watching. So that for me is one of the qualities that I equate to ethical leadership.
Thank you so much.
And I couldn't agree more. And for me, when I think about it, and I love the idea of consistency. I think anybody watching the Springboks this last weekend know the importance of consistency. And one of the things that I think is role modeling. To me, you've got to live it. You've got to be it. You cannot expect those around you to be something that you are not yourself. And I've always said that an organization takes on the characteristics of its leaders. And so your personality will come into the organization, and what you tolerate will be tolerated. So I think that is really, really important, is that you are the role model, you are the example. And especially for these youngsters, and especially for, we have such a diverse society. Not everybody always knows what the unwritten rules of the organization are. We always walk into these places, and those that have been there for a while know what the rules of the organization are, but the new people don't. And so they've got to be shown it. It's got to be demonstrated to them as to what's expected of them. And I think that's really important, and you can do that through role modeling. Live the experience that you expect.
Absolutely agree. A few thoughts also from my side. I haven't seen much happening there in the chat, but I think, certainly respectful challenge and honesty and integrity. I think it links to the point, Babalwa, that you also made about transparency, so really welcome those identifications. So now that we know what it is that we're aiming for, let's move on to how are we going to build this culture. So Karen, how would you say does one measure and monitor ethical behavior and culture in a small firm?
I mean, it's such a difficult thing in a certain way, because, the ethics is something, again, that it's behavior and it's respect. And to monitor it, I think it's going to be through conversation. It's going to be through discussion. It's going to be how you deal with when things go wrong. We were talking about transparency, but I also think context. And transparency, I've always said to people, is frosted glass. You've got to show enough for people to understand the context of decisions. but it's also the way people behave. So, when you see people, I mean, I've always said, how do people feel on Sunday night? You can have a very difficult, challenging workplace, but that doesn't mean that you're unhappy to be there. And the vibe and the atmosphere within the organization, it will tell, it'll show. People will leave when they're unhappy, not because of the work, but because of the experience that they're having, and how well they feel supported, and how well, again, that consistent leadership and that role modeling. So to measure it, I think, is to sort of see what the outcomes are, to see the behavior, to see, are people accountable? Do people put their hands up and say, I made a mistake, please guide me? Or are people trying to hide it? Is there backstabbing? Are people throwing their partner under the bus rather than taking the measure for themselves? Are people standing together as a team? And I think it's really through those observable inputs and those conversations that you have that you'll get a very quick sense as to what the organization is looking like and feeling like, and how much work you need to do. But that also means you've got to be present. You've got to be part of, you've got to be there, but observing. And one of the things I think we'll talk about as today goes on is you can't sit too closely to your staff. If you're going to get a good sense about what's going on, you need a little bit of distance. And I think that is something that's going to come through today, is that be careful about sitting at the table and, going out on Friday night drinks, because if you're going to pick up what's really going on, you can't be too, we practice stand back as auditors. And I think you've got to practice that within your organization as well, is stand back and actually closely observe and be objective about what's happening in your office.
I really related to what you said about, how you respond when things go wrong. I think certainly for me as well, when I thought about, how do you measure and how do you monitor, I really think there's intention behind it. You need to do it intentionally. I thought to myself, if it was me, I think you have to reflect on not just the easy experiences, but also the difficult things that you as an organization or as a team or something go through. And you really make an intentional effort to learn from those, the things that you did wrong versus the thing that you did right. And I think, that I think also supports growth, internally within the organization. So absolutely. Moving on, Babawa, what do you think are the biggest challenges or threats to ethical decision-making in small firms? And how do you think can firm culture influence how you navigate those ethical dilemmas?
Sure. I think we face a lot of challenges as a small firm, but if you look at the biggest threats would be fees, one, any commercial pressures that the organization is facing would be a huge threat. Secondly, any resource constraints that you are having and facing, challenges around resources as a firm becomes a challenge. You are midway in audit, a resource resigns, or something happens that they're not available for the period of time you anticipated them to be available. It will always affect, planning, always affect execution, always affect the decisions that you're taking. So it's very important that the culture that we've created in our firm is to emphasize on quality. We don't compromise on the quality, regardless of the challenges we're going to face. If we stand firm and say we're not going to compromise on the quality of the audit just because we're short-staffed, we're not going to cut corners, we're not going to try and find the quickest way of doing something just so that we can chase a deadline and meet it on time. So I think it's so important that things like quality are ingrained in the culture, and everybody knows that. Regardless of the challenge we're facing right now, one thing we will not compromise on is the quality of what we deliver to our clients. So I think that's one of the principles we're using at Majali to ensure that we're overcoming these many challenges we face as small firms. But yeah, that's one thing that has really guided us.
I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Karen. I also have a few thoughts.
I'll always want to add. That's never a thing.
Okay, you have a short opportunity to add.
Yeah, I've got a short opportunity. So with me, I was just thinking, in a small business, it's familiarity. And familiarity, yes, with your staff, but also most often small businesses work very closely with their clients. And that idea that your clients become friends and your friends become clients, and you've got to manage that, to have that separation and that distance, and not to get too pulled in, that I think is a real challenge. And also, I think that there's an immediacy in a small practice. So in a bigger practice, you've got layers of leadership. You've got supervisors and managers, and we hear the partner sitting at the boardroom table with the first year trainee, and the staff are watching. They're watching everything you do. They're watching how you behave, how you react. And so it's all in the small things. I really do believe ethics is about the small things. The bigger things don't happen overnight. So it's, if you're striving for excellence, you have to, you know, how you present yourself in your dress, how you conduct yourself in the way that you speak to people, how you communicate on WhatsApp, how you communicate in your emails. I know that I'm keeping on with the role modeling, but it really is in the little things. It's for the staff to see when somebody walks in and says, please, can I certify this? And you say, where's the original? And they say, I don't have it. But you know me, Karen. I'm like, yes, but I still need the original, thanks. And not compromising on those little things, but for your staff to see, and you can do it very nicely, but for your staff to see, we strive for excellence. We hold ourselves to a high standard, and I'm holding myself to that standard. Therefore, I can hold you to that standard. So I think that the fact that we are always, most small businesses work in close communities, and to the professional respect, I think, is also a challenge for small businesses. We're all hunting in the same areas, hunting with the same client base, and to deal with our colleagues and our competitors, to see them as colleagues and not competitors. Don't throw the previous auditor under the bus. How do you talk about others in the profession? I think is really important as well.
I agree, and I think you've touched on different aspects, the both of you, you know, where I think, Babawa, you touched on a lot of, you know, the external pressures, the client pressures, the economic pressure, you know, the capacity constraints, those types of things. And then I think, Karen, you know, I think you talked a lot about not compromising on little things and holding ourselves to the high standard that we earned, right? We worked hard for this.
There's nothing wrong about being excellent.
Exactly, right? I think some of the other things that I thought about as well is, and I'll conclude the question, I think, with this kind of quick war story, because, Babawa, you triggered something for me, and that is that how often we find ourselves in a difficult situation because as people, we're overextending ourselves. You know, when I was doing quality reviews in the UK, and at that time I was living there as well, I had to actually witness a larger firm closing a small office due to quality concerns. You know, they had more clients that they could handle. They had extreme timeline pressures, capacity constraints, all of the things that you've mentioned. And they did their best. They almost worked themselves to death. And in the end, it wasn't enough. They lost focus on what the important things were. And they were thwarted by all of these external distractions. And the ultimate outcome was that people lost their jobs. But I think for me, the takeaway then was, I remember thinking, this could have happened to anyone. No one went out and intentionally did something unethical or wrong. They grinded, you know, but their grind was misplaced. And they didn't prioritize the right things.
And I think, Lisa, just to quickly, like, to build on what Albert's saying and what you're saying as well, I think one of the things is, and to also bring in what Babal was saying as well, it's capacity. And I think one of the things is you cannot sacrifice fees, which is why we have to work as well with our colleagues and others in the industry. Lowballing, undercutting just hurts everyone. You know, you need the time and the capacity to ponder, to think, to work. Rather take those silver clients and those gold clients than 100 brass penny clients, because those brass penny clients will be taking 80% of your time for 20% of your fees, and you will get yourself into trouble because you will overpromise and underdeliver, and quality will suffer. And there's more than enough work out there for us to be selective about the people that we bring into our space. And I think that also is a large part of ethics, is choose the people you surround yourself with, clients and staff, because that's your first frontier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very valuable point. Very valuable point, Karen. So, but if I can skip a few lines, I think forward to you. So, I think Karen mentioned as well, you know, when you're trying to measure ethics, it's about, you know, how having conversations and how open those conversations are in the office, you know. So how, as a partner, managing partner within a firm, you've got all these other stresses, you have to kind of manage the distance, but also be engaged with your staff. How do you encourage people to come forward, you know, especially considering everyone knows each other?
Yeah, I think there's a fine line, and you need to manage that fine line, and you have to kind of create a balance, because you also don't want to be inaccessible to your team, for them to come to you when a mistake happens, so that you can be able to give guidance on time, and quickly respond, and kind of address issues as they happen. I think one of the most important things is to encourage that culture of being open, the culture of communication. I think people who become friendly with each other in a small firm, like you were saying, Karen, that it's a small firm and everybody knows everybody. And there's that sense of feeling like I'm throwing my colleague under the bus if I raise this issue, if I tell on them, So you have that kind of protective layer that employees will have because of the familiarity with each other. But you need to encourage the openness and encourage the fact that mistakes do not result in punitive measures, but mistakes are for us to learn from them and grow from them, so that we do not try to cover up mistakes all the time. Creating a balance, it's difficult when you don't have all the different layers that a bigger firm would have, so that you can have that distance, and also create a nice balance between being familiar with your staff, but you need to ensure that you have at least 2 or 3 layers of supervisors and managers before yourself, and there's not too much of direct involvement in the day-to-day auditing. If you have a lot of involvement in the execution of the audit, then it will kind of blur those lines. You need to try and create those levels of reviews and supervision, so that you're not entirely involved in the auditing and the day-to-day of that process.
There's something that you're just mentioning there that made me think of a Simon Sinek quote, which was, people will forgive, breaches of competence. That when you make a mistake and there's a competence, but people will never forgive breaches of integrity. And I think when you're dealing with staff, there's that accountability is, I made a mistake, I fixed it, and showing them how you take ownership of that. But a breach of integrity is a whole different kettle of fish. And that is held to a different standard. But I also think that distance, don't go to the office parties, show yourself and leave. There's also a case of, let them see the tough person you are as well. Don't let them think that you're soft and big marshmallow. Let them know that you've got that in you as well, because they mustn't be so comfortable with you that they don't respect you. I think is also important.
I think both of you have touched on something that I think is actually very difficult to learn, and that is an aspect of emotional intelligence and self-awareness to an extent. And I firmly believe, as Babawa mentioned as well, you have managers and you have other staff as well. And if you as a partner find connecting with the staff in a certain way perhaps challenging, you should see which of your more senior or long-standing people who have worked with you for a long time, what type of example do they set to the other team members? And if they set a good example, perhaps they can be like your ethics champion, and you can be, that connects with the people, and you can, get some insights from them as to where people are, what your teams are actually experiencing on the ground. Because also the reality is your teams are probably out at the client, a lot more than you are. And so if they're experiencing any pressures and that they're perhaps afraid to raise, how would you know about it? So yeah, that's just something that I thought about as well. Karen, if I can go back to you briefly. We talked previously about, what are the kind of threats to our culture and so forth. And I mentioned the story about, how sometimes we simply get distracted by life, and lost in the grind. So how do we integrate ethics into our daily business? And how do we train our staff, not only on the URBA code, but how to successfully navigate ethical challenges? And I think that kind of links to one of the concerns that I think it was Anna-Marie that raised it in the thing as well, where she said, she actually thinks people just struggle with the balance.
No, I mean, 100%. The one thing, I say to my trainees when I meet them and I discuss this, and anybody that knows me knows, I said, you wake up in the morning, you put your cloak of professionalism on, and you go to bed at night and you take it off. It never really leaves you. You live with it permanently. I mean, and another test, much like the Sunday night test, is when you go out to supper with your friends, who splits the bill? It's something that you practice in all your dealings. It's how you greet the barista at Seattle. It's how you work with those around you. It's in all those little interactions that really does demonstrate it. But it's also showing your staff that you can take a hard line, that you can't be intimidated, you can be assertive. It's having your staff's back when they need it. I think that's an important point. Talking about horror stories and things, I remember as a young girl in the 90s being a trainee and going into a manufacturing concern and having very bullish management that we were dealing with, and having our partner just stand up for us. And helping us, just show us how to stand up against this environment, which is very different now. They won't recognize it nowadays to what it was back then, but having somebody just have your back, and showing you that you've got the support. And I think with ethics, the other thing that I think that I really, if I can just get this out there, is support. I mean, I think we've got support here. We're talking to each other. We're saying it's all tough. It's hard. We battle to do this. And that's where the conversations are important. But to actually have somebody that you can have a sounding board and say, to talk it out, and somebody that says, yes, I see what you're saying and what you're wanting to do is right. I think just for somebody to support you, and to support your staff and have their back when they are needing to do difficult things, I think will teach, show, and create that it becomes that you don't expect anything else. You'd be shocked if somebody did something different, because that's not the way we do things.
That's true. I think you gave a great lead in actually to the other question that I wanted to ask of Babalwa, which is really, if you as a managing partner are faced by uncertainties, whether it's technical dilemmas, whether it's ethical dilemmas, just simply you're stuck in a situation, and you don't know what to do. How do you resolve it? It kind of makes that. Every time I ask this question, I think about this question, I kind of go, who are you going to call? Ghostbusters. Sorry, it just happens. but Bola, what do you do? Assuming you don't call the Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I think I probably am the same as you, Lizzle. I always ask myself, who am I going to call? I think I've had so many of those moments in my journey as a firm owner. And I think one that I remember, because that was the most difficult ethical dilemma I faced. I told myself, I'm not going to pretend like I know the best way out of this situation. And that was the first thing, acknowledging that actually I don't know how to deal with this. And I either need to do more research on this, or I need to get guidance on what would be the best approach. Acknowledging you don't know something is much better, and pretending you don't know something, pretending you actually know something when you don't know it, is so dangerous. And that's what happens as a firm owner or somebody who is a service provider. A client would expect you to have all the answers, expect you to come with every solution to every problem, or know how to navigate every kind of circumstance. And for us to pretend we know when we don't know puts us in a more dangerous position. So for me, I acknowledge when I don't know. And if it's something that's more complex, I avoid giving a response or a direction on the spot. I'll say, wait, let me think about this. Let me apply my mind. I'll get back to you. And in me applying my mind, do a bit of research. And if I have to, like Karen has been saying, call a friend, ask somebody, get a sounding board. I did that, and with that one big ethical dilemma I faced, it resulted in me resigning that client to say, look, this is the decision we've come to. We've considered all of the factors and all of the circumstances, and unfortunately, as a small firm, having to let go of a client and resign from a client is a very difficult decision to make. But you have to make it if it's the best ethical decision that you can make for your firm, as well as, for the client. So I think for me, I always make sure that I do not put myself under the pressure of giving a direction or a way forward or an answer when I'm uncertain. And I spend time thinking about something and calling a friend, getting a sounding board. If really I need somebody to look at the details and the client information, I bring in a service provider that will obviously go through signing ethical declarations and stuff and get really technical guidance on something.
Thank you so much, Babola. I really enjoyed that. I must say, even for myself, I'm also sometimes, I'm not scared to say, explain. I don't follow. I don't know. I need some more time to think. And I do certainly do relate to that approach. I have 2 points just quickly to make around this. How to help your staff and how to help others. And I think the first thing, knowledge is power, right? Your goal shouldn't be the 3 hours of ethics CPD that's prescribed. There really are some very good ethics sessions, and the cycle ones, honestly, those ethics in practice series are they not that expensive in terms of the time and the effort it would take to create your own training around ethics, completely worthwhile. And obviously we have wonderful service providers who do work around this as well. So do the training and make sure that, because that's where the real practical discussions happen, right? Secondly, I think is, if you don't know who to call, really put some effort into building your professional network. There are so many people that you can connect with, and SACA really does a good job with this as well. Similarly, if you're interested in the work of the Committee for Auditing Standards or the Committee for Ethics on the oversight to keep up to date with all the technical developments, we always need people on task groups and so forth. And through that, you learn and you build connections, and next time you will know who to call. So transitioning to closing, it's such a great discussion, but unfortunately we do only have about 2 minutes left. So I think, I'm going to thank you in advance for a great discussion. I know it was a little bit delayed, but certainly I think, some very useful points that have been made, and I'm sure everyone in the audience appreciates it as well. But before I hand over to my standards director, Sadia, for her closing remarks, I just wanted to invite you to briefly say 1 or 2 words of imparting wisdom. Thank you.
I don't know who's going to go first, but I'll jump in for a second. Just say the one thing that I've always said to when I've discussed ethics and spoken to people, I've always said, trust your gut. When something doesn't feel right, if it smells fishy, trust your gut. And also document. I've always wished I could hand every single person I've ever spoken to a journal, because it doesn't mean that journal will make it to the file, but it's just a moment when something didn't feel right. Something my grandmother used to say, something in your waters didn't feel right, and pay attention to that, because you might land up having to reflect on it to figure out what it is, what was said, what wasn't said, who was in the room, to figure out why you feel uncomfortable. But the moment you feel uncomfortable, don't ignore it. Yes. You have developed that sixth sense, you've developed that instinct, and invariably, every single one of us, we don't regret it when we pay attention.
Absolutely. Babola?
Thank you very much. I think, for me, I've realized over the years, it's so important to protect the reputation that we've built, and not to compromise on your ethics merely for convenience or for profit, because it takes so long to build a reputation as a professional, but one bad decision, just for convenience or profit can really damage that reputation, and it will be difficult to repair it. I think that's my main takeaway, why it's so important to maintain and protect your ethical standards as a professional.
Thank you so much, Babola. Both of you ladies, have a lovely afternoon, and thank you for your time. Over to you, Sats.
I want to start by quoting Babola. Babola said, mistakes do not result in punitive measures. And I think today that is a lesson that we have learned. So life has a funny way of surprising us. Just when you think everything's under control, we got the slides moving, a curveball gets sent, and you have to learn to dance as we go. Firstly, thank you so much for everyone who stayed with us. We still have 150 people on the call. We're really appreciative of your time. Thank you to the panelists for your engagement and your preparation for this session. We heard about technology, professional growth, ethics, and culture. Each one of you have left something with us to take back. And that's what the real value of these sessions are. It's as much as we appreciate the engagement we get here, it's actually what happens afterwards. Noveed, one of the key messages from Noveed was that with growth comes great responsibility and the essentials of a future-ready SMP. We heard from the leaders on technology, stay curious, lead proactively. Unfortunately, we didn't have time for all those presentations, but those will be made available after the session for you to distribute and to study in a little bit more detail. I love that the technology one said, always document your process. That was a reminder that as much as we move forward, we also have to be cognizant of what we know as auditors. Thank you, Zakira, for speaking us through the ADP process and debunking some of those myths surrounding the process. There was lots of engagement on the previous chat that I think Zakira answered, as well as the current chat. But of course, there is an ADP email address that has been shared and will be shared after the session if you have any concerns that you'd like to address. And of course, this culture. 153 people came back for this culture session, which is so important, and we love the sharing that was illustrated in the session. Of course, this will also be made available on the recording as we clean up. I know that we are over time, but I just want to leave us with a message of what we can do as we move forward. As I said, please continue to take this engagement that we had here and talk to your peers about it, your colleagues, your managers. The recording will be shared. You should be sharing that with others because that's what we would like to do. Follow us on social media and LinkedIn. This will allow us to keep abreast of those things that are coming. If something is not coming up in the media you are consuming that was discussed today, ask yourself why. Why has this year not come up? Why isn't these the things that we are learning about? This is our second webinar dedicated for SMPs, and we hope to continue these conversations directly with SMPs in the next year and in the future. A reminder that this is actually part of the URBA strategy on how we increase awareness and provide some kind of initiatives on new pronouncements and ethics standards, specifically for SMPs. It would be remiss of me not to mention what's coming through next year. There were certain points in the year when we were discussing new standards that we thought, I wonder what an SMP would think about this. How do we alert SMPs early on the new changes that are coming through? And sometimes it feels like a wave is coming. But this is your early warning that ISA 240, the standard on fraud, has been revised. ISA 570 on going concern has been revised. And if you are auditing in public traded entities, there are some narrow scope amendments for you to consider. Now, as you consider this, we are ending towards the end of the year. So this is a whole year advanced notifications. So leave it on a post-it for your table when you come back in 2026 and say, how am I going to track this? So I have one suggestion. If you have someone in your office that is keen and eager, ask them to be the champion of these standards, because as much as the standards need to be read, there's also guidance that will be produced and will be produced at different times. The IAASB has already begun distributing guidance on these topics. The SICA will be having their own forums, as well as ACCA, on getting people ready for these standards. And the IRBA will also be developing guidance and illustrative reports. This would be something that you want to take with you. The last thing that I have to do is probably to thank my team. Today was a very strange day. We apologize for the slides. Technology does sometimes throws curveballs, and we need to think about how this would happen. So there were some lessons on sharing, but at the same time, I would like to call Yusuf back on screen. So Yusuf was the person in charge of the entire webinar, and I would like to thank him. And over to you, Yusuf, to close.
Thank you, Sadia. I think apologies for the technical issues that we experienced today. But just in closing, I also would like to just say thanks to our speakers and the panelists for sharing the expertise, and to everyone who called in before and called again to stay on this call. I hope you leave with some valuable insights to implement into your practices and daily work. Thanks a lot.